I'm Tarek Mounib, and today I'm the face of America.
What we're doing is we're taking people here from different points of view, bringing them all to Egypt to have a dialogue.
I was listening to the news, I was watching the news, and I was getting really scared, especially what was happening in America and the rest of the world, this polarity and suspicion, all this hate between people and all this polarity and suspicion. And I just couldn't understand it because I grew up as a Canadian, you watch American TV, so you have American heroes, you have this love of America. And as someone from a Muslim background, I have a love of Muslims and Arabs, and I just couldn't understand why this was happening. And I noticed I was developing a fear of Americans, just simply what I was hearing about on the news. So I thought, okay, well, this is weird, I need to do something. I need to go face the Americans, but not in anger, but actually let's do something kind for them. And that was the idea of, okay, how can I deal with my own fear in a kind way? And then this idea came, why don't I offer a free trip to Egypt as a way of doing something nice for these people, but then at the same time having a dialogue. And that was really transformative for me, because as soon as I stepped foot on American soil, as soon as I started talking to Americans, I realized that I had a fear and preconception of Americans that also wasn't justified. So it was really transformative for me to actually meet Americans and just talk.
You want a free trip to Egypt? Huh? Do you think you'd be interested in going to Egypt? And
Absolutely.
Yeah?
I think where we need to start is on the human level. I think whenever the discussion is abstract, what did the Muslims do? Who are the Muslims? Who are the Americans? People get defensive, right? But as soon as you meet somebody and you just simply talk and you see this person is just like you, there isn't this concept that Muslims are this group that's a certain way. I mean, I don't take credit for the mathematics that the Arabs discovered thousands of years ago, and I don't take blame for the terrorist acts, right? And I think this concept that there's this other group called the Muslims, it scares people. And it's not true, because the Muslims, quote unquote, there's just such a diversity, just like Americans. What's a typical American?
My fear is being taken hostage.
When 9/11 happened, I just lost it. I'm so racist now, I can't stand myself.
Specifically with pro-Trump supporters, I think what I learned is that they're not as scary as I thought. Especially if you're watching certain news channels, you develop this fear that 60 million people who voted for Trump are racists and we're headed for World War III. I didn't feel that was the case. I felt, many of those people were the same people who voted for Obama, and they weren't, from what I experienced, they weren't voting for Trump out of racism. A lot of them, when I spoke to them, were voting for Trump because they were just completely fed up with the establishment. So they'll say, I know Trump says this, but I don't agree with that. And then they'll start saying why America is in such a bad state politically and we need a radical change and stuff of that sort. Of course, there were the extremists and the racists, and I don't want to play that down because they were there, especially at the Trump rally. But the vast majority are people that you can actually talk and have an intellectual discussion with.
Since I've been here, it's completely different than what our news media tells us.
I'm real cautious about what we're getting into.
I just ask for supernatural protection right now in Jesus' name.
One of my favorites was Ellen, who was in her 70s. She was Jewish, and she basically said she's completely afraid of Muslim men and Arab men, and she's really worried that she's becoming racist. So we paired her up with an Egyptian revolutionary just to see what would happen. Jenna was a former Miss Kentucky, and she came with Jason, and both of them were Christian preachers who wanted to spread the love of Jesus into the Middle East and baptize Muslims. So we paired them up with a very orthodox Muslim family where the man had a beard and the woman wore the burqa. So that was a very interesting pairing. Brian was a big Marine that we met at the Trump rally. We paired him up with a beautiful Egyptian dancer. Mark, a big, tough policeman, we paired him up with a comedian journalist. Katie was also a former Marine. We paired her up with a young Egyptian photojournalist. So there were really amazing pairings that we really took time to think about, and it was just amazing and fascinating to watch their stories unfold.
I think a lot of people think that there are going to be so much that's not the same, and I just felt there was so much that was the same.
Am I your first Jewish friend?
What I realized, the biggest lesson that I learned on the trip is that I've never traveled with such a diverse group of people. Politically, religiously, age, culturally, they're completely diverse and really, some would say extreme views. I mean, very, polar views. And somehow through listening and respect, we managed to stay together as a group. And that really taught me that, okay, if such a diverse group could live together, why not the rest of the world? So that's what I learned from the film, and that inspired what we're calling the Pledge to Listen movement. And we're bringing together also thousands of people across the globe that want to see more listening and kindness in the world.